There are things that happen in the city when the sun goes down. The rules are different. Montreal's red light district at the turn of the century was a place of renown. It was run by the criminal underworld. The city was wide open for pleasure and for entertainment. Well, two men tried to bring an end to all that. The book is called Montreal After Dark, Nighttime Regulation, the Pursuit of a Global City. It is written by historian Matthieu Caron, and he joins us now. Hi, the book was really a lot of fun. So many things I had never really thought about, so thank you for that. Because we forget that there was a time when there wasn't a nightlife. I mean, nightlife was a new concept that had to come into its own, and it really came into its own under Mayor Camillien Oud. We know him as the road over the mountain now, but he was a mayor. What was that like? How did it come about?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the program. I'm really glad to be here. The history really begins in the mid-19th century, as Montreal, like other industrialized North American cities, saw technological change in the expansion of artificial light, which transformed how night was experienced. So by the turn of the 20th century, industrial light expands to places of commerce like cafes, taverns, cinemas, theaters, bars, and it gives rise to new patterns of leisure. And as you mentioned, it's really under Mayor Camillien Oud in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s that Montreal developed a reputation of this North American wide open city. And so depending on what the consumer was looking for, they might find it in different neighborhoods. So jazz clubs in Little Burgundy, or the brothels in the red light districts. And so various aspects of the nighttime economy, which are totally out of the norm even today, were tolerated, sometimes even protected. And we can think of alcohol being sold at all hours, or gambling dens and brothels operating more or less at an industrial scale.
And then we had Mayor Jean Drapeau. I mean, he comes in, he was only like 38, 39 years old. He was going to change everything. He had his crime fighter partner, Pax Plante. Their vision for Montreal was very different, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, let's start with Pax Plante. He was a determined municipal court lawyer who exposed corruption between the police, politicians, and organized crime. And he built this reputation as an incorruptible crime fighter, targeting gambling dens and sex work. And he even received death threats for his efforts. And then Jean Drapeau, who's also a lawyer, turned that reform energy into a political movement. So together with other reformers, they pushed for a public inquiry into corruption, and they rode that momentum into City Hall. So over the next decade, first with Plante and after with other politicians, Drapeau positioned himself to transform Montreal's so-called wide open nightlife into a tightly regulated system. And by the 60s, Drapeau's goal was a global ambition. And this is what I tried to show in the book, where, if he believes that if he's able to control the night, in other words, regulating sex, alcohol, noise, protests, then Montreal could become a modern, internationally respected metropolis. And in his view,
he did. Yeah, and he did with Expo 67 and the Olympics. But the other thing that's interesting that you point out in your book is nightlife isn't just about entertainment, right? All kinds of things could happen at night. The protests and the strikes could play out. There were some frightening times. I mean, you described Red Weekend. That was a terrifying weekend.
Yeah, so the night can also be deeply political. So, the book traces a number of case studies where order could quickly unravel after dark. The Red Weekend's an excellent example of that, where the firefighters decide to go on strike, and in the span of a single weekend, over 150 homes are burned to the ground. And then there's another inquiry into what had happened in that process, and it came to light that actually some of the firefighters were themselves involved in the arsons. There's also another example of this is the Night of Terror, when both the firefighters and the police department go on strike. And so without their protection on the streets, there's looting, there's fires.
And
there's also other protests. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and very quickly, because we're almost out of time, you conclude your book by saying the struggle for the city's future played out at night. What has happened to Montreal since Drapeau? Does the struggle continue?
It certainly does. We've seen it recently with, nighttime venues facing really high fines for noise complaints, and the types of debates that are revolving these days are still political flashpoints. Not so much about morality, but about whose vision for the city would win between, say, people who want tranquility and others who want to experience that cultural hub.
Well, Matthieu, thank you so much for the book. It was really a very, very interesting book. It's Matthieu Caron, Montreal After Dark, and thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.